In the quiet village of Nkambi, nestled between vast stretches of farmland and a gently flowing river, lived a young man named Sifunjo. Sifunjo had a face as smooth as the lake on a calm morning, and his smile, quick to appear and just as swift to disappear, was well known in his village. He was admired by many, especially for his charm, but there was one thing that weighed him down heavily: poverty. His family was not destitute, but they struggled. Sifunjo, like most in his village, toiled from dawn to dusk, doing what he could to keep hunger at bay, yet he longed for more. He wanted to live in a grand house, own fine clothes, eat delicious food, and escape the toil that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Every morning, as he crossed the bustling marketplace on his way to work, he would see his peers, the lucky few who had inherited their parents' wealth or those who had found a way to prosper. Their lives looked so different from his own. Some rode in fine wagons pulled by sleek horses. Others lived in houses with high walls, adorned with intricate carvings. Sifunjo felt a pang in his heart each time he saw them, imagining himself in their place. He dreamt of a life filled with comforts and luxuries, though his humble reality was worlds away from such visions. One hot afternoon, while weaving through the market crowds, Sifunjo overheard two elderly women talking nearby. Their voices, though low, held a note of excitement. They whispered about a wealthy woman in the village, Madame Ngozi, who was seeking a husband. The elder, with her skin creased like ancient parchment, recounted the tale in a voice that was both curious and wary. Madame Ngozi, she said, had no children to pass her wealth to and sought a young, strong man who would take care of her in her later years. The woman shook her head as she spoke, as if warning her friend of the dangers of such an arrangement, but Sifunjo's heart quickened. He moved closer, pretending to browse a nearby stall, his ears straining to catch every word. The older of the two women sighed, noting that Madame Ngozi, while old enough to be his mother, had a beauty about her that seemed untouched by time. She's wealthy, owns the largest farm in the area, and has investments far beyond the borders of Nkambi. And she's generous, the elder noted with a thoughtful pause. But she's also cunning and wise beyond her years. The younger woman merely shook her head, cautioning her friend about such wealth without an air. They muttered something about loneliness and then continued their shopping, their voices fading into the noise of the marketplace. But Sifunjo's mind was already racing. Madame Ngozi might be old, he reasoned, but her wealth could mean an escape from his hardship. He barely heard his friend Adeko calling his name over the bustling market until he felt a tap on his shoulder. Adeko, his closest friend, had a smile that seemed too large for his face, and a hearty laugh that could rattle birds from trees. When Sifunjo told him of the rumor, Adeko laughed so hard he nearly toppled over. "You would marry Madame Ngozi for money?" Adeko teased, eyes wide with disbelief. "She's not looking for a companion. She's looking for a strong, young helper who won't shy away from work." Sifunjo waved away his friend's concerns, undeterred. His voice, though filled with excitement, also carried a sense of resolve. "I will do whatever it takes, Adeko," he replied, his eyes bright. "This could be my only chance to live the life I've dreamed of." That night, he could hardly sleep, his mind filled with images of grand feasts, rich fabrics, and a life beyond anything he had ever known. In the early morning, Sifunjo rose, dressed in his best clothing, and made his way to Madame Ngozi's mansion. The house was a striking sight. Tall walls encircled lush gardens filled with vibrant flowers. It was the kind of home Sifunjo had only seen from a distance, and as he approached, he felt both nervous and thrilled. When he knocked on the heavy wooden door, his heart pounded in his chest. After what felt like ages, the door creaked open, revealing Madame Ngozi herself. She stood before him, her tall frame draped in fine silks, her hair wrapped elegantly in a colorful scarf. Her face, though lined with age, held a warmth and wisdom that Sifunjo hadn't expected. Her eyes sparkled as she looked him over, and he could feel her sizing him up. "What brings a young man like you to my doorstep so early in the morning?" she asked, her voice steady and calm, though her eyes danced with curiosity. Sifunjo took a deep breath, his mouth suddenly dry. This was his moment. He stood up straight, summoning the charm he was known for, and looked her in the eyes. "Madame Ngozi," he began, choosing his words carefully. I have heard that you are seeking a companion, someone to share your life and assist you. I believe I am the man you seek. A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, but her gaze remained thoughtful. She chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to carry both amusement and challenge. And why would a handsome young man like yourself wish to marry an older woman like me? She asked, her voice as calm as still water, but her eyes sharp and probing. Safunjo faltered, taken off guard by her question. He had expected her to be flattered, perhaps even eager, but her eyes remained steady and unyielding. Gathering his thoughts, he offered his most charming smile. Madam, it's not just your wealth that draws me, he said, though the thought of her riches certainly played a part. I am drawn to your wisdom and strength. Together, we could accomplish much. Madame Ngozi looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, her smile deepening. Very well, Safunjo, she replied, her tone both mysterious and kind. But marrying me will not be as easy as you think. If you wish to be my partner, you must prove your worth. Safunjo's heart leaped. He had expected her to accept immediately, but instead, she was setting conditions. Yet, the thought of wealth, of the life he could have, made him determined to face whatever she had in store. I am willing, Madame Ngozi, he said firmly, bowing his head. I will do whatever you ask. That evening, as he left her mansion, his mind raced with possibilities. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the village as he made his way home. He imagined the life of luxury that awaited him, and the burdens of his current existence seemed to lift. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the memory of Madame Ngozi's gaze. The way her eyes had seemed to pierce right through him. Her words, about proving his worth, lingered in his mind, giving him a feeling he couldn't quite place. The following morning, Safunjo woke early, his heart filled with anticipation. He dressed quickly and made his way back to Madame Ngozi's mansion. Upon his arrival, he was greeted by an elderly woman, Mama Ija, Madame Ngozi's housekeeper, who had known her since childhood. Mama Ija's gaze was sharp, her eyes carrying a wisdom of their own, and she looked at Safunjo with an expression that made him feel as though she could see right through his intentions. Mama Ija, Safunjo greeted her with a slight bow. Madame Ngozi is expecting me? Mama Ija nodded, her expression serious. Madame is in the garden. Follow me, she instructed, her voice carrying a note of caution that Safunjo didn't miss. She led him through the mansion's halls, lined with paintings and sculptures that spoke of a wealth far greater than he had imagined. As they reached the garden, Safunjo felt his nerves prickling, but he steadied himself, reminding himself of his goal. Safunjo took in the sight of Madame Ngozi, seated on a stone bench beneath a large baobab tree. She was admiring the vibrant flowers that filled the air with a sweet fragrance. Her gaze remained fixed on the blossoms, but she motioned for Safunjo to sit beside her, and he felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. After a moment, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. Safunjo, you showed courage by coming here and asking to join me in life. You have passed the first step, but there are many more to follow, she began, her tone serious. You will find that wealth brings both privileges and responsibilities. The man who will stand beside me must be both strong and wise, capable of handling not only labor but delicate situations. Today, I will test your patience and your sense of responsibility. Safunjo nodded eagerly, trying to mask his excitement. Tell me what I must do, Madame Ngozi, he replied. She handed him a large woven basket filled with food. Take this basket to my workers at the far farm on the village's edge. It may seem a simple task, but it will show me if you're ready to serve others before seeking reward. A flicker of confusion crossed Safunjo's face. Delivering food seemed trivial, not the challenge he had anticipated. But he quickly forced a smile, determined not to question Madame Ngozi's instructions. He lifted the basket and began the long trek to the farm under the relentless midday sun. As he walked, his mind wandered to thoughts of luxury and riches. Though this task seemed small, he assured himself it was a stepping stone toward a better life. The farm was located at the farthest edge of the village, and the journey was harder than Safunjo had expected. By the time he arrived, the sun hung high in the sky, and sweat dripped down his back. His arms ached from carrying the heavy basket, and he silently cursed the simplicity of the task. Yet as he stepped onto the farmland, he was taken aback by its sheer size. Endless rows of crops stretched as far as he could see, tended by dozens of workers who looked up as he approached. An elderly man, Baba Musa, led the workers. He was a tall, lean man with skin weathered from years under the sun. When he saw Safunjo, he wiped his brow and walked over, eyeing the young man curiously. "Ah, you must be the young man Madame Goza sent," he said with a wry smile. "You're here to bring us food?" "Yes, Baba," Safunjo replied, setting down the basket and straightening his back, hoping to appear more dignified than he felt. Madame Goza wanted to ensure her workers are taken care of. Baba Musa laughed, a deep, hearty sound that echoed across the fields. "Take care of us, you say? Young man, this life is not as simple as carrying baskets and delivering food. Madame Goza wants to see if you're here for the hard work or just for the promise of riches." Safunjo's cheeks flushed, but he held his tongue. He was about to respond when a shout from the far side of the field interrupted him. One of the workers was waving his arms, signaling an issue. Baba Musa's expression shifted immediately, concern flashing across his face. "The irrigation line has broken," Baba Musa muttered, squinting toward the distant rows of crops. "If we don't fix it soon, the crops will suffer." Without a second thought, Safunjo rolled up his sleeves. "Let me help," he offered. The workers glanced at him with mild surprise, but Baba Musa nodded, accepting the offer. They worked under the scorching sun, digging, lifting, and adjusting the pipes to restore the flow of water. Safunjo's muscles ached, and he felt the toll of the labor, but he pushed through, driven by the determination to prove himself. By the time they had fixed the irrigation, the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon. When Safunjo handed the now empty basket back to Baba Musa, the old man clapped him on the shoulder with a proud smile. "Not bad, young man. You may be here for wealth, but you've shown you're not afraid of hard work." Safunjo smiled, pride and exhaustion mingling in his expression. It wasn't the day he had imagined, but he felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't expected. As he made his way back to Madame Goza's mansion, Safunjo felt his steps become slower, weighed down by the fatigue of the day's work. But his resolve only grew stronger. This was only the beginning. He would do whatever it took to secure the life he desired. Madame Goza was waiting for him in her sitting room when he returned, her expression calm but her eyes watchful. When she saw the dirt on his clothes and the exhaustion on his face, she nodded approvingly. "You did well today, Safunjo," she said, her voice carrying a hint of pride. "But remember, this is only the start. If you wish to join me, you will face more tests. The life I live requires endurance and loyalty, not just desire." A chill ran down Safunjo's spine, but he forced himself to nod. "I understand, madam," he replied, trying to ignore the growing apprehension in his chest. He left the mansion that night with a sense of accomplishment, but Madame Goza's words echoed in his mind, filling him with a lingering sense of foreboding. The next day, as the sun began to rise, Safunjo returned to Madame Goza's mansion, ready for whatever she would ask of him. This time, Mama Ija greeted him at the door, her gaze somber. "Madame Goza is expecting you in the garden," she informed him, leading him to the lush, green space where Madame Goza sat once more, gazing thoughtfully at the flowers. When Safunjo approached, Madame Goza looked up, her expression serious. "Safunjo," she began, "you showed courage and strength yesterday, and that is commendable. But there is more to wealth than labor. It requires wisdom, patience, and a clear sense of responsibility. Today, I have another task for you." Safunjo straightened, feeling a surge of determination. "I am ready, madam." Madame Goza's lips curved into a small smile, though her gaze remained unreadable. "Today, I need you to go to the marketplace and collect money owed to me by some of my debtors. Some of them owe me significant sums, and I need someone I can trust to bring it back safely. But be mindful, the marketplace is filled with those who will avoid paying if they can. This will test your patience and your skill in negotiation." Safunjo nodded, feeling both excitement and apprehension. He knew the marketplace well, and he was familiar with the people who worked and traded there. But collecting debts was a different matter entirely. The marketplace was bustling by the time he arrived, filled with the scent of spices, the chatter of merchants, and the vibrant colors of fabrics and goods for sale. His first stop was at Aya Shade's store, a woman known for her fiery temper and sharp tongue. Safunjo approached her cautiously, introducing himself and explaining his purpose. Aya Shade's face hardened as she listened. She folded her arms and gave him a look that could melt stone. "Young man, tell Madame Gozi that I will pay when business is better. This season has been hard, and I have mouths to feed," she said firmly, her voice laced with defiance. Safunjo took a deep breath, remembering Madame Gozi's words about responsibility and negotiation. He softened his tone, explaining that he understood her struggle but emphasized that Madame Gozi had been patient. Eventually, Aya Shade sighed and handed him a small pouch of coins, her expression reluctant but resigned. As he moved through the marketplace, Safunjo encountered similar responses: reluctance, excuses, and occasional cooperation. By the time he had collected the debts from all but one debtor, the sun was beginning to set. The final name on Madame Gozi's list was Chief Abina, a powerful man with a reputation for evading debts. Safunjo hesitated but steeled himself, knowing he couldn't return empty-handed. When he arrived at Chief Abina's store, the chief greeted him with a broad, calculating smile. "Ah, young Safunjo," Chief Abina said, his voice smooth and untrustworthy. "What brings you to my humble corner?" Safunjo explained his purpose, doing his best to appear confident. But as he spoke, Chief Abina's smile faded, and his expression turned cold. "I owe Madame Gozi nothing," he replied curtly, crossing his arms. "Tell her that I am not some small-time merchant to be summoned and demanded from." Safunjo felt a prickle of fear, but he forced himself to stand firm. "Chief Abina, I am only here on Madame Gozi's behalf. If you have any issues, you may address them with her." Chief Abina's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Safunjo thought he would refuse outright. But instead, the chief let out a low chuckle, leaning in close. "You are brave, young man," he murmured. "But be careful. Not everyone takes kindly to Madame Gozi's demands. Go back and tell her I will settle my debts when I see fit." With that, Chief Abina turned away, signaling that their conversation was over. Safunjo's heart raced as he left the store, feeling both defeated and uneasy. By the time he returned to Madame Gozi's mansion, the sky had turned deep blue, and stars had begun to dot the night. He recounted his day, handing her the coins he had collected and explaining his encounter with Chief Abina. Madame Gozi listened intently, her face unreadable as she considered his words. "You have done well, Safunjo," she said finally, her tone thoughtful. "This task was meant to show you that wealth comes with challenges, both expected and unexpected. But I am pleased with your persistence." For the next several weeks, Madame Gozi continued to test Safunjo with various tasks, each one more difficult than the last. He mended fences, managed farm workers, settled disputes among her tenants, and assisted in business negotiations. Every day brought a new lesson, and though the work was exhausting, Safunjo grew more capable, his understanding of responsibility deepening. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Madame Gozi called him into her sitting room. Her expression was softer than usual, and her gaze held something that looked almost like pride. "You have proven yourself, Safunjo," she said, her voice warm. "You have shown strength, resilience, and loyalty beyond what I expected." Safunjo felt a rush of relief and pride at her words, though he tried to keep his expression calm. "Thank you, madam," he said quietly. "I wanted to prove that I am more than just eager for wealth. I want to serve you well and live up to the responsibility that comes with it." Madame Gozi nodded, studying him thoughtfully. "Your words speak to your growth, Safunjo. The journey toward wealth and responsibility is not just about what you can do, but about who you become along the way. You are a different man now from the one who first came to my door. Because of this, I have decided to entrust you with a final task that will mark the beginning of your true role in my household." Safunjo's heart beat faster, a mix of anticipation and nervousness swirling within him. "Whatever you need, madam," he replied with a slight bow. She rose, walking to a small chest by the corner of the room. From it, she drew out a beautifully carved box with intricate patterns of animals and plants that seemed to dance in the flickering candlelight. Handing the box to Sifunjo, she placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression serious. "This box contains my most valuable possession," she began, her voice low. "Inside is an ancient relic, a stone that has been passed down through generations in my family. It is said to bring great fortune, but only when it is guarded with wisdom and respect." She looked him in the eyes, her gaze intense. "I want you to take this relic to the shrine at the edge of the forest and offer it as a token of gratitude to the spirits who have blessed our lands. It is a gesture that my family has done for decades, and it ensures that the prosperity we enjoy will continue for the next year." Sifunjo held the box with reverence, sensing the weight of the responsibility Madame Ngozi was entrusting to him. "How will I know the way to the shrine?" he asked quietly. Madame Ngozi smiled softly. "The spirits will guide you if your heart is sincere. You will see a path open up through the trees as you approach the forest. Follow it until you reach the shrine. But remember, this is a journey of faith and focus. Do not allow yourself to be distracted or tempted by anything you encounter along the way." With these words, she turned and left the room, leaving Sifunjo alone with the box. He took a deep breath, feeling both honored and nervous. This was more than a simple task. It was a sacred responsibility that would determine his future. He vowed to himself that he would not fail. The next morning, Sifunjo set off toward the forest at dawn, the carved box held securely in his hands. As he walked, he thought about all he had learned since joining Madame Ngozi's household, the patience, the resilience, and the respect for tradition that she had instilled in him. This journey, he realized, was not only a test but a way for him to prove that he had absorbed these lessons. As he approached the edge of the forest, he noticed something unusual, a narrow path, illuminated by shafts of morning light filtering through the trees. The path seemed to beckon him forward, winding deeper into the heart of the forest. Sifunjo took a deep breath, recalling Madame Ngozi's words about faith and focus, and stepped onto the path. The forest was serene, filled with the soft rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. The air grew cooler as he ventured further, and a feeling of calm settled over him. But as he walked, he began to hear a faint voice, a melodic, whispering sound that seemed to float on the wind. Curiosity prickled at him, and he paused, straining to catch the words. The voice sounded like a lullaby, a song so beautiful it tugged at his heart. For a moment, he felt an urge to follow the sound, but he remembered Madame Ngozi's warning and shook his head, forcing himself to continue down the path. As he walked, other distractions appeared, a patch of ripe, fragrant berries growing along the side of the path, glistening in the dappled sunlight, a small rabbit hopping playfully nearby, as if inviting him to chase it, and even the distant sight of a golden pool glimmering through the trees, its surface reflecting the sunlight like molten gold. Each sight tempted him, whispering promises of beauty, comfort, or pleasure. But each time, Sifunjo reminded himself of his purpose and Madame Ngozi's words. He kept his gaze focused straight ahead, resisting the allure of the distractions. Finally, after what felt like hours, he saw the outline of the shrine emerge from the trees. It was a simple structure, made of stone and wood, with ancient carvings that seemed to pulse with a quiet, timeless energy. With a deep sense of reverence, Sifunjo approached the shrine and carefully placed the carved box upon the altar. He knelt before it, bowing his head in silent gratitude and respect, feeling the weight of generations of tradition settle around him like a protective cloak. As he rose to leave, he felt a warm breeze sweep through the trees, carrying with it a whisper of approval that seemed to come from the spirits themselves. He turned to leave, but as he walked back down the path, he noticed that the forest seemed brighter, more alive than before, as if acknowledging his act of respect and sincerity. When Sifunjo returned to Madame Ngozi's mansion, she was waiting for him at the door. Her eyes softened as she looked at him, and for the first time, Sifunjo saw a glimmer of pride and warmth in her gaze. "You have done well, Sifunjo," she said, her voice filled with a deep satisfaction. "You have proven your loyalty and your wisdom. From this day forward, You are not only a trusted companion in my household, but a steward of the wealth and responsibility that comes with it." And with those words, Safunjo felt the weight of his journey settle within him, not as a burden, but as a source of strength and purpose. He had set out in search of wealth and luxury, but he had found something far greater, a place of respect, honor, and belonging. In the days that followed, Safunjo's role in Madame Gose's household changed significantly. No longer was he simply an eager young man chasing wealth. He was now a confidant, involved in the running of her businesses, respected by her workers, and trusted by the villagers. As he walked through the village, people greeted him warmly, and he saw admiration in their eyes. They recognized him not just as a servant of Madame Gose, but as someone who had earned his place through hard work and integrity. One afternoon, Madame Gose called Safunjo to her private study. She was sitting by the window, her gaze fixed on the vast field stretching out beyond the mansion walls. "Sit with me, Safunjo," she said, patting the chair beside her. He took his seat, sensing that this conversation would be important. "You have learned much in your time here," she began, her tone softer than usual. "You have shown that you are worthy of the trust one placed in you, and you have handled every challenge with strength and grace." Safunjo listened, his heart swelling with pride, yet he remained humble, aware of how much he had yet to learn. "Thank you, madam. It has been an honor to serve and to learn from you." She smiled, her eyes holding a rare warmth. "But I believe it is time for you to consider your own path," she continued. "You have become like a son to me, and I want to see you flourish not just here, but as a man who can build his own legacy." Her words caught Safunjo by surprise. He had grown comfortable in Madame Gose's household, but the idea of forging his own path was both exciting and intimidating. "You have the skills, the character, and the wisdom," she said, "but the choice is yours. I can help you acquire land and start your own enterprise, or you can continue to work here as my right hand. Either way, you have my blessing." Safunjo felt a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. He had gained so much from his time with Madame Gose, but he realized that she was offering him a chance to become his own person, to make his own mark on the world. "Thank you, madam," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Your guidance has been invaluable, and I am honored by your trust. I would like to take the opportunity you offer to create something of my own, but I hope to carry your lessons with me always." Madame Gose nodded, clearly pleased by his decision. "I am proud of you, Safunjo. I will help you get started. But remember that true wealth lies not in the gold and land you acquire, but in the wisdom you apply to your actions and the legacy you build through honesty and kindness." With Madame Gose's support, Safunjo acquired a small plot of land on the edge of the village. It wasn't grand or lush, but he saw potential in it, just as he had once seen potential in himself. He worked tirelessly, applying everything he had learned, and slowly but surely, his land began to flourish. He hired a few workers, treating them with the respect and fairness that Madame Gose had taught him, and they, in turn, were loyal and diligent. Months passed, and Safunjo's small farm grew in both size and reputation. The villagers spoke highly of him, admiring his honesty and dedication, and he became a figure of trust in the community. One day, Madame Gose visited him at his farm. She looked around, her face breaking into a proud smile as she saw how much he had accomplished. "You have done well, Safunjo," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You have built something of your own, and you have earned the respect of everyone around you." Safunjo bowed his head, his heart brimming with gratitude. "I could not have done this without your guidance, madam," he replied humbly. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Safunjo, true wealth is not about how much you own, but about how you live and treat others. You have understood that lesson well." From that day on, Safunjo continued to grow his farm and even ventured into new businesses, always keeping Madame Gose's words close to his heart. He had started his journey seeking wealth and comfort, but he found something far more valuable, a life rooted in respect, integrity, and wisdom. As years passed, Safunjo became known throughout the region not only for his success but for his kindness and fairness. He helped others, shared his knowledge, and became a pillar of his community, a legacy that would endure long after him. And in quiet moments, He would remember his early days in Madame Goza's mansion, grateful for the tests that had forged him into the man he had become. As Safunjo's reputation grew, so did his responsibilities. People from surrounding villages came to seek his advice, and he soon found himself mentoring young men and women who wished to follow in his footsteps. He saw himself in their eager faces, recalling his own dreams of wealth and success before he had learned the deeper values that Madame Gozi had instilled in him. He made it his mission to pass on the same lessons, guiding others to work hard, stay honest, and respect the land and people who supported them. One day, he received an unexpected visitor, a young man named Ise, who bore an uncanny resemblance to Safunjo's younger self. Ise was ambitious and determined, much like Safunjo had been, and he sought to gain wealth and status quickly. But Ise's path was filled with shortcuts and risky dealings, as he wanted success without the hard work. "I hear you're a man of great wisdom," Ise said, bowing respectfully. "I want to be successful like you. Tell me, Safunjo, how can I gain wealth quickly and live a life of luxury?" Safunjo regarded him with a gentle smile, remembering his own thirst for fortune at that age. He invited Ise to sit with him under the shade of a large baobab tree, the sun casting dappled light on the ground as they spoke. "Ise," Safunjo began, "there is no shortcut to true success. What looks like an easy path today may cost you more than you realize in the future. Wealth that comes too quickly will often leave just as fast, but wealth earned through dedication and honesty stays with you." Ise frowned, clearly dissatisfied with this response. "But you were poor once too, Safunjo," he insisted. "You know how hard it is to live without comfort. Isn't there an easier way?" Safunjo nodded, understanding the young man's impatience. "Yes, I was poor," he replied, his gaze distant as he recalled his past. "And I was willing to do anything for wealth, even if it meant losing my own values. But I was fortunate to meet someone wise who taught me that wealth without integrity is an empty prize. You might not see its value now, but one day you will understand that a life built on honesty and respect will always stand strong, while one built on shortcuts will crumble." Under Adana's leadership, the village's prosperity spread to nearby communities. She was often invited to share her wisdom at gatherings, and each time, she credited her success to the values passed down from Safunjo. Through her, neighboring villages began to adopt similar principles of honesty, unity, and integrity, transforming the entire region into a network of thriving, interconnected communities that supported one another. Adana, like Safunjo, mentored the young people in the village, teaching them not just how to achieve success but also how to sustain it in a way that respected their culture, land, and fellow villagers. She reminded them that their heritage was not just a story of one man's rise to wisdom but a collective commitment to the values that bound them together. One night, during the annual festival held to celebrate the village's history, Adana stood under the baobab tree, surrounded by villagers of all ages. She recited the tale of Safunjo and Madame Gozi with a reverence that moved the listeners. The children leaned forward, their eyes wide with wonder, and the elders smiled, nodding as each familiar detail unfolded. When Adana reached the end of the story, she paused and looked around, her eyes meeting those of the villagers. Her voice softened as she spoke. Safunjo's journey was not about the pursuit of wealth or even the desire for wisdom. It was about discovering the strength that comes from within and understanding that true success is measured not by what we gain, but by what we give. The crowd sat in reverent silence as Adana continued. "Our lives, like Safunjo's, are filled with choices. With each decision, we have the chance to honor the legacy of those who came before us by building something greater than ourselves. And in doing so, we create a world where every generation can stand on the strong foundation of wisdom, compassion, and unity." The villagers erupted into applause, and the children, inspired by the tale, began running through the fields, playing and laughing, embodying the spirit of hope and resilience that defined their heritage. The elders, touched by the reminder of their collective journey, exchanged proud glances, knowing that the village's future was secure in the hands of those who valued its past. As the night sky stretched over the village and the stars shone brightly above the baobab tree, the villagers sang songs of gratitude and joy. They knew that while Safunjo was no longer with them in body, his spirit, his wisdom, and his teachings would forever live on, guiding them through the generations to come. And under the protective branches of the tree of wisdom, the village thrived, each life intertwined with the values that had transformed their community. The legacy of Safunjo and Madame Ngozi remained, not just as a story but as a living, breathing part of the village's soul, a guiding light that would endure for generations, rooted deeply in the hearts of those who understood that true wealth was measured not by riches, but by the legacy of love, unity, and wisdom shared with others.